Okay, welcome back to Gooner Pavilion. And, I was just thinking about things that as we go through this off season, I know everyone is focused on transfers, who Arsenal building, their future with, who's coming into the club, who's leaving. And, we've got another, podcast that just focused on transfer. But today I wanted to ask the question, and I'm sure this question has crossed a number of Arsenal minds, and maybe it's something that, we might start to have a conversation about, as Arsenal fans, and that is, are we getting too comfortable? Um, it's an interesting question, to ask, and I'll explain what I mean by that question. So we've had 3 seasons, 3 attempts, 3 fails at the final hurdle. So I want to work through that because there's something I'm sort of thinking about. I'm wondering, if there's anyone else who has the same sort of thought process. If you're thinking about this as well, I'll really love to know. What are the fans, Arsenal fans, really thinking about, the Arsenal journey so far. So season one, when we went for the title, it was a surprise, right? Because there is no Arsenal fan that expected Arsenal to win the league, even though I did kind of call it, half-heartedly the season before. But I think that was more in response to a lot of jabs, from non-Arsenal fans, Man U fans, Chelsea fans, and the like, and I was like, oh, we're gonna win the league next season. We wait and see what happens. But that really took us by surprise. We hit the halfway mark in that season with over 50 points. Saliba was immense. Odegaard was running the show. And for a while, we really looked like contenders. I think a lot of people were saying things like, no one has ever been top at Christmas with this amount of points and not gone on to win the league. But then Saliba injury came and the squad depth was massively exposed. And City pounced, but it still feels like it was magical. It was a free-flowing Arsenal team. Everybody was scoring for fun. There were some incredible goals. Remember the Reece Nelson goal against, I think that was Bournemouth. Everyone felt that this could potentially be it. Arsenal could be far ahead of their journey, their project, their plan, and go ahead and win the title. That didn't happen. Season two, that was a narrow miss. The following year, it wasn't really surprising anymore, right? We were contenders. I think no one was taking Arsenal very likely at this point in time. And we went the distance, right? And people point to the game against Aston Villa where we lost that game. If we hadn't lost that game, we could have been neck and neck with Man City and potentially win the league. We lost the league by 2 points that season. It felt like progress, though. It was a near miss. It felt like progress. It felt like the platform was there. We had most of our players fit, and then everyone was talking about, should we be getting a striker? But then remember, Havertz had that surge at the start of 2024 where he went on an unbelievable run, scoring loads and loads of goals. And we thought, oh, maybe, that's a solution to our problem. We don't need to do anymore. We went into that summer transfer window. I don't know whether I want to say a bit arrogance. I mean, obviously, hindsight is great, to sort of look back at the Arsenal season, look back at the previous year and say, we were arrogant. But I think everyone just sort of expected, hey, we've missed it twice now. Next year is definitely going to be our year. Everyone was calling it. Gary Neville was calling it. There were lots of people in the media were calling that Arsenal were going to win the title next because no one could see anybody else really, really coming in and doing the job because City had just won the league, they'd won the treble. Everyone expected City to have that, bit of a slump, when you've achieved everything that you wanted, that ecstasy that you get to. And then now you're wondering, where can I go from here? And I think a lot of people thought, yeah, maybe Man City would suffer a little bit from that. But, and they did, but it was in a slightly different way. So let's look at year three. So season three, last season, Arsenal started strong again, and then it was a different kind of challenge we're facing. We had our running battles with PJ Moyle, with Arsenal getting sent off, getting unfavorable decisions. Then we had the injury bug hit Arsenal every single month until the end of the season. And the football wasn't all as slick because I mean, who would be? When you at one point you had all your front four players absent, no Martinelli, no Havertz, no Saka, and you're thinking, where are the goals going to come from? Mikel Arteta got inventive. We got Merino to start. He started scoring goals, but you could see that Arsenal, could be a team who's working hard, relentless, and have a clinical goal scorer could really get at Arsenal. And we suffered that, with 13 draws this season or something like that, something ridiculously crazy. But there was also something off, right? It feels like that killer edge wasn't always there. And I mean, you can look at that and say, that had to do with injuries. That had to a combination of form for players like Odegaard potentially, who was also injured as well. But as City faded, it wasn't Arsenal who stepped up, it was Liverpool. We didn't collapse really, but we didn't grab it either. And it was really, really frustrating, really frustrating. And when, as you do in the off season, you sit back and then you reflect on what the season could have been. And that for me, that's really the heart of my podcast today. So the heart of the conversation. Um, After three failed runs, does it start to chip away, I believe, especially players that are still there? Does it soften the edges of the squad that has been nearly meant for 3 years? Because people are gonna, pull that tag. Fans, are never kind to other fans. Why would you? We always get a chance to hip on, pile on, other fans of other clubs. So I expect fully, other fans to do the same to Arsenal. Um, you know, so when you come so close, you either double down or you fall into thinking maybe we're not good enough already. And that's dangerous, right? So I'm not talking about doubting Arteta here. And before a lot of you come at me and say, never believe in Arteta. And, and I have to hold my hands up and say I was one of those. But I think, I have been backing him quietly in the last, at least the last season, and maybe pretty much half of the season before last. I think it's about hunger. It's about hunger, and that's something that I want to be answered this season. I really want to see the hunger that is still in the players. I know players are talking, and everyone's talking about, how we didn't make it and how we should go about making it. But I want to see that hunger. Sometimes it's not in the first 11, and I think that's the thing. When players come out of the team and other players go in, is that hunger there? Is that hunger across the camp, right? Not just, one or two players, but is that competitive edge there? How can Mikel Arteta bring that competitive edge where we know that we have the squad to compete, and because we're having success on the pitch, no one's grumbling. Because I mean, there's like 60 or so games to be played, and if we do anything close to what we did in the Champions League, last season, there will be games for everyone. And it's now about, is that hunger there from the manager to assemble a squad that he can trust to go out there and deliver the goods? Because that's been another thing, with Mikel Arteta. He has a squad that he never fully always trusts. And for me, that's frustrating because you got the whole off season, and Arsenal are back to you completely. We've had players leave the club, we've paid off contract. So for me, I feel like Arteta has earned the trust of the club to ask for something and get it. So when you start the season and then you have players that are on the bench that you can't bring into a game because you don't fully trust them, I think that's on the manager. I really do. So guys, what do you guys think about this? Am I way off in terms of my thoughts with regards to Arsenal? Do you think Arsenal are staying sharp, or slipping into comfort? Do we think that now we've gotten up there that minimum position is going to be second? We don't need to really do anything because, with the squad that we've had, we've hit second a few times, right? Or is this summer really the summer to reignite that flame, that hunger? Or are we letting that window pass? And in American football, which is another sport that I absolutely love, and please check out my channel on Across the Gridiron, where I talk everything about American football. We always talk about the Super Bowl window, that window where a team would have an opportunity to have all the pieces that they can, but in offense and defense, to make a run to the Super Bowl. And it usually starts with having the right quarterback in the team. And then people say, oh, they've still got a Super Bowl window, especially when that quarterback is very good and they're on their rookie contract and the team can add weapons to help him. And I do ask the question, with Arsenal, missing that window, that premiership window, is that going for Arsenal? Because surely you go into next season, the expectations are going to be high. But do we have that hunger? I want to see it. And I think it starts in the offseason. This is not just about transfers. It's not just about players that are coming into the squad. It's about how the squad is preparing themselves to go into the new season. And of course, that means, signings as well. But I think it's not just about signings. I think it's the whole thing of recognizing we've come up short 3 times. How can we reenact that flame and keep going? So I'm asking you the question as well. Hit that subscribe button if you like what I've just said. But also let's have your say. Join in the conversation. Let me have your thoughts. What do you think, about Arsenal? Are we in danger of being complacent and thinking that we've done enough to win the title? Or should we be going super aggressive in this offseason and making sure that the only place that we finish next season in the Premier League is number one? Let me know what you think about that. And that's been it for me today on a Gooner Pavilion. It's not easy asking the tough questions, but someone has got to ask those questions because that's what real fans do, right? When we have this conversation and we have discussions with ourselves. So like, subscribe, keep your eyes peeled. We're watching the summer, right, together. And whatever happens, as Arsenal fan, we're going to all feel it together. So you take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.